Hey there, my name is Terry from Tree Marie Soapworks, and today I'm excited to show you this design. I'm taking inspiration from paper marbling, and I'm using the 9-bar slab mold. I love using the slab mold because you get instant gratification. You get to see your design right on the top. To set yourself up for success, you need a slow-moving recipe, and you also need a fragrance that doesn't accelerate. If you're interested in using my specific recipe, I have that up for sale on my website, so check that out. It's a slow-moving, palm-free vegan recipe. If you're interested in this soap, it's going live in my shop the same time this video is going live, and it's first come, first served, so check that out on my website. Throughout this video, I will be giving you tips on how to avoid acceleration, and also I talk about it when I'm cutting and beveling the soap, and the What I Learned segment of the video is back, and there's a few things I would have done differently, so stay tuned. At the end of the video, I show you some color combination ideas that I just came up with by changing the hue a little, and they are gorgeous. I would love to know your favorite. I think mine is the teal and turquoise one. Okay, let's get started. First, use about 1/3 to 1/2 of your water weight in distilled water ice cubes, and then top off the remaining water weight with cold distilled water. Next, to measure the sodium hydroxide. And remember, if you're new to soap making, this isn't a recipe to be starting with. Before you get started with soap making, you need to understand lye safety. After measuring the sodium hydroxide, I add that to my cold lye water and carefully stir that until it's dissolved. Next, I measure the sodium lactate, and sodium lactate is a completely natural ingredient. It's not necessary in your soap. It just helps to harden your bar, and it also helps the soap to release from the mold a little easier. I use it at a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. I set these ingredients aside then in a place that's well ventilated and free from any kids or pets. Next, I measure the coconut oil, and I melt that in the microwave in 30-second bursts until it's completely melted. In the meantime, I measure the liquid oils, starting with the avocado oil, then the castor oil, and finally the olive oil. Next, I measure the fragrance, and today I'm using Green Irish Tweed from Elements Bath & Body. This fragrance doesn't accelerate, and it only discolors ever so slightly. It's one of my go-tos because my customers love this scent, and also it behaves well in soap. I use it at a rate of 5% of the total soap batch weight. Next, I measure my kaolin clay, and I'm using this at a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. This is another optional ingredient, but I really like what it does in soap, but it can accelerate your batter a little. Next, I add the fragrance to the liquid oils. This fragrance is only added to the liquid oils because I know how it's going to behave. I have experience using this fragrance. So for this particular technique, I would suggest only using fragrances that you are experienced with and fragrances that don't accelerate. I stick blend this into the batter, and I get all the clumps out before I ever add my lye solution. Here are the colors I'm using. I love the contrast of black and white, and I picked the blue and the turquoise because they're not so contrasty. I wanted the black and white to really stand out. Okay, I'll get back to the titanium dioxide, but the second color is Twilight. That's from Mad Micas, and I used it at a rate of 2 teaspoons per pound of oils. That first colorant that I used was titanium dioxide, and I used it at a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. I did pre-disperse it because titanium dioxide can be really hard to get mixed in, and it causes specks, so it takes some work. I mix it in oils instead of water because I don't like the way it kind of an oil and water thing. It doesn't really want to mix. You have to stick blend it in. Stick blending causes acceleration, and I don't want to do that. So I want to just be able to stir it in. So that is why I pre-disperse my titanium dioxide in olive oil. The next colorant is Key West, and that's from Mad Micas. I use that at a rate of 0.75 teaspoons per pound of oils. When I'm adding the olive oil to dilute the micas, I usually just use enough to get that diluted, but when I'm using it with activated charcoal, I'm using a little more because activated charcoal is very absorbent, therefore it can cause acceleration. Same with the titanium dioxide, I always dilute that a little higher, which is that 3-to-1 ratio, that 1 part titanium dioxide to 3 parts of olive oil. That will help the colors stay even when you mix them in, because sometimes the more absorbent colors can cause acceleration. The last colorant really isn't a colorant at all, it's an additive, and it's activated charcoal or smooth coconut carbon. I get that from Elements Bath & Body, and I use that at the rate of 1.5 teaspoons per pound of soap, which is very close to 2 teaspoons per pound of oils. Now that the coconut oil is completely melted, I add the shea butter, and in this case I had to cut it up first because it melts so much faster if it's in smaller pieces. Okay, now let's talk about the mold and some of the tools needed for this one. The mold is something my husband made for me, but you can get those online. You can get a nice sturdy silicone liner, and also I have a video on how to make your own 9-bar slab mold out of a cardboard box. As far as the dividers go, I made these at home too, and you can do it too. I have a video on how to make dividers, and I just did 9 compartments. So basically every bar would be divided into 3 stripes. As for the rake tool, this is just corrugated cardboard, and then I put a skewer in every other little hole. Okay, I'm just going to prepare you for the rake throughs, and we'll do a little dry run here. For the first rake through, we'll be going from the closest end to you to the farthest end of the short length of the mold. So here I'm preparing the skewer tool. I will push them all down and make sure that the ones that are in the mold are touching the bottom of the mold. You can push those ones up on the side if you want to, or just leave them as they are. Then I'll just rake through from the bottom to the top. Keep in mind that the tines on this rake are pretty close together, and if your batter is thick and your gut says this is not going to work, this is just going to push all my batter to the other end, don't do it this way. You could either push every other one up, or you could just use one skewer and do the same effect and it won't drag it all to the other end. Okay, to show you the next rake through, we're going to push all the skewers down and then push up every other one. And then we're going to fit those skewers to the long length of the mold. The rake throughs will go from the right to the left, pull it out, and then from the left to the right, kind of down in between those that you just did. So you can go ahead and get your rake tool back ready for the first one to fit the short length of the mold. Okay, I see that the shea butter melted on its own, and now I'm adding the cocoa butter. If the cocoa butter doesn't melt on its own, just go ahead and microwave it until it's just barely melted, but make sure it's completely clear. Now I'm going to prepare my squeeze bottles, and I have a video on this too, so I will put links to all the videos I have mentioned in the description below. Next, I add the liquid oils to the melted hard oils. Then I add the sodium lactate to the lye solution and stir that in. I usually strain that mixture into the oils, but this time I see no floaties in there of any kind, no lint, so I just poured this in without using a strainer. I usually soak between the temperatures of 85 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 29 to 35 degrees Celsius, but it's not something to get hung up on. It's usually what my ingredients are at naturally by that time. I will talk more about this later. Next, I add the lye solution to the oil solution. Before we mix this together, we need to do some calculations. Now we are going to weigh the bowl and the contents and then subtract the weight of the bowl. This weight is something that I wrote down earlier. It's not in the scale anymore because I've measured other things in other containers, so it won't be in the memory. Once I find the weight of the contents of the bowl, I'm going to multiply that by my percentages. First we have 41%, then 14, then 34, and then 11. Write down those numbers and we'll use them shortly when we're splitting our batter. At this point I stick blend until an emulsion is reached. Here when I pull out the stick blender and I'm resting it on the side of the bowl, I'm looking at that bell of the stick blender and I'm looking at the coating on there. And is the coating streaky? Can you see specks of stainless steel through there? So you're looking for either streaky or specks, and at that point you still need to stick blend. But if it's a nice thin coating, and especially when you turn your stick blender sideways and let it drain off, is it still a thin even coat and no streaks and no little specks of stainless steel showing through, then then you know it's emulsified, and don't stick blend after that. We don't want your batter at trace at this point because you won't have time to split your batter, get it colored, get it into the squeeze bottles, and start pouring and pour your whole design. It won't give you enough time. Okay, the batter is just how I want it right now, so it's time to split off the batter into those 4 different percentages that we figured out before. At this point, you don't want to mess around, you just want to keep your pace up and get this batter split and then colored. And then at that point, you may find that you have to wait for the batter. This is a very slow moving recipe. It's kind of a hurry up and wait thing. You have to get all your stuff done, and then once your stuff is done, you need to be patient. Wait for that batter to come to trace. Do not stick blend your colors in. Do not stick blend after that. Just wait. I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, especially if you don't prepare your colors ahead of time. Your colors need to be easy to stir in. If you don't have them prepared and you just add them dry, you are going to have to stick blend them in to get them mixed well. And that causes acceleration, and at that point it's just too late. It's beyond the point it needs to be at. Of course, when I'm talking about this and I'm saying don't stick blend anymore after an emulsion is reached, I'm only referring to techniques that you have to have your batter stay fluid. If it's something that you pour in at medium trace, so you're not doing a bunch of swirls, then don't worry about it. You definitely should stick blend in your colors. But I'm just saying, if you're having trouble and you're wanting to do swirls, that's when you only get it to an emulsion, have your colors ready, and only stir the colors in. Don't stick blend anymore after that, and just wait on your batter to become the proper trace. I put it up on screen earlier, but in case you missed it, the black batter is 11%, the white batter is the 34%, the Key West is the 14%, and the Twilight is the 41%. Next, pour the turquoise and black batter into the lined squeeze bottles. This is where you may have to wait on your batter to trace, or you may have to hurry up depending on how your batter is behaving. In this case, I did have to wait on my batter. I want it to thicken to a light trace. I want it to have a little thickness to it. I want there to be some resistance to it when I'm stirring. Just to let you know, if you didn't make the dividers, you can still try this technique. What I would try to do is just pour in stripes. Don't worry about how thick the stripes are and what the order of the color is. As you get closer to the top, you'll probably be able to control it a little easier, and then you can try to be more particular. You think you're pouring bad when you're pouring stripes, but really, once you swirl it, you can't tell. Now it's time to get ready to pour, and I put this on a Lazy Susan. I would not recommend that because it just moved too easy as I was trying to move my skewer tool. So don't use a Lazy Susan. That's one of my what I learned tips. Next, it's time to pour the blue and white batter, and I did learn something doing this too. It's better to pour blue, white, blue, white, blue, white, instead of pouring all the blue and all the white. And what I did is only use half the batter. So I'm kind of doing this in 2 stages. I'm doing half the batter, and then I'm going to do the next layer kind of and do the rest of the batter. Next, I accent the white with the black. You can see here I have big spots of black, and that is because I was waiting for the color to come out and then I started moving. I remember I shared a tip in another video, I think it was the pointy layers video, that I said start moving your squeeze bottle, or it was your pitcher in that case, but start moving your squeeze bottle before the color comes out because you don't want it to be that concentrated in the corners. You want some of that white to show through. Now it's going to be covered up, so who cares? But it's just something I want to make a mental note of and try to do it better next time. So I have the first half of the accent colors in, and now I'm just adding the base colors again, and I'm finishing off all the blue and all the white. Once that's all done, I finish off with all the accent colors. Next, I remove the dividers and I rake through from the bottom to the top. Here's where it would have been easier if I didn't have that Lazy Susan underneath, so I'm going to remove that. I've changed the orientation of the mold from portrait to landscape, and I push all the skewers down, fit it to the mold, and then I push up every other one. And then I insert it all the way to the bottom on the side that's closest to me, and I just drag it up along that left side that skewer's touching. And don't forget to pull that rake tool out in between swipes. Next, I reinsert it right in between the lines that I previously made and drag it back toward me. Then I change the orientation of the mold back to portrait, and I use that glass rod and I make my first swipe up the side, and then I make that second swipe down what I think is the middle of that bar, and then back up the side of the bar, and then back down the middle of the second bar, and then up and down and up again. And I do have those bars marked on here, but I didn't mark the center point, and that was a mistake. I should have marked the center point. That left side, the center really got marked a little off. So here's what I would suggest. Just divide that area by 6 right away. Mark the marks on the top and the bottom, and that would be 5 marks. And then you'll have your guides there. And when you're using your stir tool, of course, you have to get that centered on that line, but if you do that and make those guides, it should come out more centered. Once you're finished with your swirls, cover your mold with cardboard and then plastic wrap, and then I oven process it. You can either oven process it or use a heating pad and insulation, but I would recommend oven processing it. I preheat the oven for just 30 seconds to a minute to the lowest temperature. You're just trying to get it warm in there. And then I put the soap in the oven, turn the oven off, and turn the oven light on, and I leave that on until I go to bed. And then I'll turn it off and let it come to room temperature naturally, and I just take it out in the morning. I leave it covered for a few days if it's humid, but if it's not, I'll uncover it within the first 24 hours. But to avoid soda ash, if you live in a place that's humid, cover your mold for the first 48 hours, and that will help a lot. To cut this soap, it's a little more tricky if you don't have a guide like I have, but you can be creative. I think if you put a ruler on each side of your soap, you will need a second set of hands, but if you put a ruler on at least one side and then glide your knife down, you would need somebody to hold both sides of your soap as you cut it so one side doesn't fall down, but I think that's what I would do or try. I did get a cheese knife, and it's a knife that has handles on both sides, but I don't really like it because it's hard to get the soap off of there once you cut it. It's kind of wants to stick to your blade, and it's just not easy to work with, so that is an option, but I don't really recommend it. I have a little soda ash here, and I used to have a big problem with soda ash on my slab mold designs. I think it's just because there's more surface area and you can get more air circulation. I cut a piece of foam board that fits directly inside my mold, and then I glued it to my foam board that's on the top of the mold. That really cuts down on the headspace, and I believe cutting down on the headspace in your slab molds helps you not to get soda ash as bad. This is very minimal what I got today, and so I would just recommend that if you're having trouble with your slab mold designs getting a lot of soda ash on them. Another thing I learned today is my liner wasn't secured properly. I have been having trouble getting tape to stick to the wood on my mold to tape the liner down. I have tried masking tape and I've tried freezer paper tape, which worked better, but recently I discovered that just plain old Scotch tape works very well. Another thing that I learned while I was making this is when I did those chevron designs, when I was sliding along that straight edge with my glass rod, I would have used a better straight edge, one that's a little more substantial, one that didn't want to slide around so much on the top of that freezer paper liner. I would have used something wider and maybe thicker and something that's a little more easy to hold on to. With the remaining time, I'm just going to talk a little bit about acceleration and how to avoid it. I had a poll recently on my community tab, and it seems like that was the biggest concern for many people. So I'm just going to highlight a few things that work for me. One is just remember you can't use every fragrance with every design technique. Your fragrances that accelerate, that smell really good and you want to use them with layers or very simple designs, 1-color designs, 2-color designs. And for layer soaps, you can actually use the acceleration to work to your advantage. Let's talk a little bit about your recipes. I use soap calc to print out my recipes, and I know some of that is intimidating, but you can use as little or as much of the information that they give you as you want. As you get more comfortable, I think you will find that some of that information is really valuable. So up in the upper right hand corner of the soap calc printout, I find the ratio of saturated fats to unsaturated fats. This is not the same as liquid oils at room temperature and oils that are hard at room temperature. This is completely different. This goes by the fatty acids, and you see below there's this lauric and stearic and all those. Well, when I make soap, I usually like a 43% to 57% ratio of saturated to unsaturated fats. That's kind of what they end up being. So really, you want to make sure that it's more unsaturated fats than saturated fats, so you don't want your first number in that ratio to be higher than the second number. And just a little note on that, these bars at this ratio are still very hard bars. Next, let's talk about temperature. Generally, the cooler you soap, the more slow moving your batch will be. But when I soap at room temperature, it's a little too cold for me because sometimes I get false trace, which is when your hard oils start to solidify and they kind of look grainy, kind of like applesauce, and it gives you the illusion of trace because it gets thick. Also, soaping at that cold of a temperature can give you stearic spots or little white spots because of your harder oils solidifying. So I soap just above that. I just want my hard oils to be completely melted. So that's the magical temperature for me. The temperature that you can just see visually. You can see if your oils are completely clear. Now, if you put clay in your liquid oils, look at your hard oils before you add your liquid oils to your hard oils. Make sure your hard oils are completely melted and then stir in your liquid oils. Also, some colorants can be accelerators. I have noticed that not only the titanium dioxide and sometimes the activated charcoal can accelerate, I noticed sometimes the oranges accelerate. So take good notes, write that down, and when you're diluting those or dispersing them, use a little more oil when you disperse them. Another thing that can happen is when you add your cold fragrance to your warm oils, it's quite a shock. One thing you can do to temper your fragrance just a bit is to warm up your fragrance or add some of the warmer oils to it. And it won't be such a shock, it won't cause acceleration and rising as much. And really the biggest tip I can give you on avoiding acceleration is just only stick blend until an emulsion is reached. If you're getting close, just slow down and even wait. If you don't know if it's emulsified, just wait and let it sit for a little bit. Stir it by hand for a little bit. That's a really sensitive time when you're making soap, and it can make all the difference. And I did talk about this earlier in the video, so if you missed that, just go back and take a listen to that. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love it that you're learning right along with me. This design was so fun, and who knows what's going to be next. I actually don't really know, but if you're along for the ride and you're not subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell so you can be notified next time I post a video. The same day I release this video, I have new soaps up for sale in my shop, so don't forget to get those before they're gone. And also, I have the recipe for this up in my shop as well, so if you're interested, take a look at that on my website. I'm going to leave you with some other color combo ideas for this design. I just did them digitally. The blue one's the only real one, and the rest are all digitally changed by changing the hue. I would love to know which one's your favorite. Like I said earlier, the teal and turquoise one is my favorite, but I really like them all. So write in the description below which one's your favorite, and also if you have ideas for videos or something you want me to tackle. I'm thinking about doing a series of easier videos of more organic looking soap, so let me know what you think about that. Enjoy these color combos, happy soaping, and I'll see you back here next time.